I saw my daughter glance toward her father when the college banner unfurled behind the podium, and in that moment, I understood how thoroughly I had been erased. The fabric dropped smoothly, blue and silver catching the late afternoon light, the name of the university stretching wide across the stage. Applause rippled through the crowd, proud parents clapping, phones lifting into the air. My daughter, Rowan Hale, stood with the other graduates at the edge of the stage, her cap tilted slightly to the left the way she always wore it, stubborn about even the smallest personal choices. She smiled, bright and effortless, but when the applause crested, her eyes flicked instinctively to her father in the front row. Victor Hale sat tall, chest lifted, hands already clapping before anyone else around him reacted. He looked exactly how a man should look when he believes he has authored the story everyone is celebrating. Rowan's smile softened when she saw him. Gratitude. Trust. The kind that comes from believing someone showed up when it mattered. I felt the familiar compression in my chest, the quiet pressure that had become my companion over the past 4 years. Not pain, not heartbreak. Recognition. I stayed seated 2 rows behind Victor, hands folded in my lap, the graduation program untouched. My name wasn't printed anywhere in it, not as a donor, not as a contributor, not even as a footnote. I wasn't surprised. I hadn't expected to be seen today, but seeing my daughter look at him like that still landed hard. The ceremony rolled forward, speeches blurring together, words about perseverance and sacrifice and community drifted over the audience, buoyant and celebratory. I listened without hearing, my thoughts folding inward, drifting backward through time. It hadn't always been this way. When Rowan was accepted to college 4 years earlier, the letter had arrived on a Tuesday afternoon, thick envelope, cream paper, the university crest embossed in blue. She'd burst into the kitchen waving it like a victory flag, breathless, laughing, half crying. I'd hugged her so tightly she complained I was wrinkling the letter. Victor hadn't been home yet. He was always working late then, always in meetings, always just missing the moments that required emotional presence rather than performance. When he did arrive, Rowan handed him the letter with shining eyes. He read it slowly, nodding, smiling. "I knew you'd get in," he said, loud enough for the neighbors to hear. "I'll take care of it. Don't worry about money." Rowan's shoulders had relaxed instantly. She'd believed him without question. I didn't say anything. I didn't contradict him. I knew better. Victor liked to be the solution, the hero, the man who made things happen. He didn't like obstacles, especially financial ones, and he liked them even less when they couldn't be solved loudly. Later that night, when Rowan was asleep, I opened my laptop at the kitchen table and logged into the account I'd been maintaining quietly for years. Not mine, my mother's. Estelle Moore had been practical her entire life, the kind of woman who planned ahead not because she was anxious, but because she believed preparation was a form of love. When she'd passed 3 years earlier, she'd left me more than money. She'd left instructions. "For Rowan," she'd said, gripping my hand in the hospital bed, her voice thin but clear. "Use my account. Keep your name off it if you have to. Let her have options." Victor didn't know about the account. He'd never cared about my mother's finances. He'd assumed there wasn't much to care about. The tuition statements arrived monthly. I paid them quietly, semester after semester. 4 years of checks routed through an account bearing Estelle's name, contributions logged as family support. No fanfare, no announcements, just consistency. Victor talked about money often, about how expensive college was, about how much he was sacrificing. He mentioned it at dinners, at holidays, at parent events, always careful to frame it as pride rather than complaint. Rowan listened. She thanked him, she hugged him, she told her friends her dad was paying for everything. I let it happen. At first, it felt easier than correcting the narrative. Then it became something else, a test of endurance, a private truth I carried alone. By the time Rowan reached her senior year, Victor's version of events had solidified. He spoke about putting her through college like it was a badge of honor. He referenced it casually, like a known fact. I stopped reacting. That morning, as I dressed for graduation, I stood in front of the mirror longer than usual. I chose a simple navy dress, understated, respectful, not trying to stand out, not trying to disappear, just present. When I arrived at the stadium, the air buzzed with excitement. Families clustered together, laughter and anticipation weaving through the crowd. I spotted Victor easily, already holding court with a group of parents, his voice carrying, animated and confident. "Worth every penny," I heard him say as I passed behind him. "She earned it, but I made sure she didn't have to worry." Someone laughed, someone clapped him on the back. I kept walking. The ceremony progressed. Names were called, graduates crossed the stage, shook hands, posed for photos. Each one carried a story, unseen and unacknowledged beneath the gowns. Then the dean paused. Before the final names, she announced, there would be a brief acknowledgement of the families whose contributions had supported the graduating class. A routine segment, donors, scholarships, financial aid. I barely paid attention until I heard my mother's name. "On behalf of the Financial Aid Office," the dean said, smiling warmly, "we would like to extend special thanks to Estelle Moore and her family for their generous 4-year contributions supporting student education." The world tilted. I felt every muscle in my body lock at once, my breath caught halfway in. Around me, polite applause began, scattered at first, then growing. Victor stopped clapping. I could see it in his posture, even from behind. The slight hitch, the recalibration. The dean continued. "This sustained support ensured uninterrupted tuition coverage for one of our graduating seniors. We are grateful for such commitment to higher education." The camera panned across the audience, landing briefly on me before moving on. I didn't wave. I didn't smile. I sat perfectly still, heart pounding so loudly I was certain others could hear it. Rowan stood frozen on stage, her head turned slowly, scanning the audience, searching. She found me. The smile faded from her face, replaced by something sharp and confused. Her gaze flicked back to her father. Victor's face had gone pale. The applause died down, replaced by murmurs. Rowan took a step forward, breaking formation. The dean hesitated, startled, but Rowan didn't stop. She walked to the microphone, her movements deliberate, her cap wobbling slightly. "Excuse me," she said, her voice carrying clearly through the stadium. "I have a question." Victor stood up. "Rowan," he called out, too loudly, "this isn't—" She raised a hand, not looking at him. "Did Mom pay for my college?" she asked. The silence that followed was absolute. Every eye turned to Victor. He opened his mouth, closed it. I stayed seated. Rowan's voice didn't shake. "Because you told me she didn't want to," she continued. "You said she refused, that you were the only one helping." Victor's composure cracked. "This isn't the time," he said weakly. Rowan turned fully toward him then, her posture straight, her expression unrecognizable. "Then when was?" she asked. The dean hovered uncertainly, torn between protocol and the unfolding moment. I felt something inside me settle. Not satisfaction, not triumph. Release. Rowan looked back at me, her eyes wide, searching. I met her gaze, steady and open. "Yes," I said quietly, though I knew she couldn't hear me. It was always me. The truth had surfaced, and there was no pushing it back down. The silence after Rowan's question did not shatter, it stretched. Thousands of people sat frozen in their seats, the weight of collective uncertainty pressing down on the stadium. This was not part of the program. This was not rehearsed. This was something raw, unfolding in real time, and no one knew where to look. Victor stood rigid, his hands clenched at his sides. From where I sat, I could see the muscle in his jaw working furiously, the calculation behind his eyes scrambling for footing. He was a man who survived on narrative control, and the ground had just disappeared beneath him. Rowan waited. She did not fill the silence. She did not soften her question. She stood at the microphone, shoulders squared, gown fluttering slightly in the breeze, looking down at the man who had always spoken for her. The dean cleared her throat softly. "Rowan, perhaps we can discuss this after—" "No," Rowan said, not unkindly but firmly. "I need to know now." Victor laughed, a short, brittle sound that didn't match the moment. "This is being misunderstood," he said, projecting his voice outward, toward the audience, toward authority. "Your grandmother helped a little, that's all. I handled the rest." Rowan's eyes flicked briefly toward me, then back to him. "That's not what the dean said," she replied. "She said 4 years, full tuition." Victor stepped closer to the stage, his voice dropping into the tone he used when he wanted to sound reasonable. "Honey, you're emotional. This isn't the place—" "Don't," Rowan interrupted. The single word cut sharper than shouting ever could. Something in Victor's face shifted. For the first time, he looked unsure, not of his argument, but of his audience. Rowan turned back toward the dean. "Is that correct?" she asked. "Was my tuition paid in full by the Moore account?" The dean hesitated, then nodded slowly. "Yes, each semester, consistently." A murmur rolled through the crowd. Victor shook his head, smiling too tightly. "That doesn't mean I didn't contribute. I paid for books, housing, travel." "You told me Mom didn't want to help," Rowan said. "You said she refused. You said she chose not to." Victor's mouth opened again, but this time nothing came out. Rowan inhaled sharply, the realization landing in layers, hurt first, then disbelief, then something colder. She turned back to me. I stood. The movement felt strange, like stepping into a role I'd never been allowed to occupy. Conversations around me hushed instinctively. I walked down the aisle slowly, every step deliberate, every breath steady. When I reached the edge of the stage, Rowan met me halfway, descending the steps without waiting for permission. Up close, I could see the tremor in her hands, the moisture gathering in her eyes. Not tears yet, something being held back. "Why didn't you tell me?" she asked quietly. I didn't rush to answer. I looked at her, really looked at her, the woman she had become, strong, intelligent, standing in the middle of a moment that would reshape her understanding of her family forever. "Because you deserved to focus on school," I said, "not on choosing sides." Her lips parted slightly. "So everything he said?" "I let him tell his story," I said. "I chose not to compete with it." Victor scoffed. "That's convenient." Rowan didn't look at him. "You let me believe you didn't care," she said to me, "that you didn't want to help." I nodded. "I know." Her breath hitched. "Why?" I took a breath of my own. "Because correcting him would have turned your education into a battleground, and I didn't want your future to be collateral." The words settled between us. Rowan turned slowly back toward her father. "You lied to me," she said. Victor bristled. "I protected you." "You erased her," Rowan replied, "and you made me part of it." The accusation landed with more force than any public condemnation. Victor's face flushed, anger finally breaking through the cracks. "I did what I had to do," he snapped. "Someone had to be responsible." "For what?" Rowan asked. "For making yourself the hero?" The audience shifted uncomfortably. Phones were lowered now, forgotten. This was no longer entertainment. This was a reckoning. The dean approached cautiously. "Rowan, perhaps we should—" Rowan raised her hand again, gentler this time. "I'm almost done." She turned back to the microphone, her voice steady but quieter now. "I want to thank my grandmother," she said, "and my mother, for believing in me enough to support me even when it meant staying invisible." She looked at me then, really looked at me, and something unspoken passed between us. Regret, gratitude, understanding. Then she faced her father one last time. "I need space," she said. Not because of the money, because of the truth. Victor's shoulders sagged. The fight drained out of him all at once, leaving only the realization that his version of events no longer belonged to him. Rowan stepped back, rejoining her classmates. The ceremony resumed, awkwardly, imperfectly, but the moment could not be undone. It had already rewritten everything. Afterward, families flooded the field, laughter and congratulations colliding in chaotic relief. Rowan found me quickly, wrapping her arms around me tightly, like she was afraid I might disappear again. "I'm sorry," she whispered. I held her just as tightly. "You don't need to be." Victor lingered at a distance, watching. He didn't approach. He didn't know how. Later, when the crowds thinned and the sun dipped lower, Rowan and I sat together on the edge of the bleachers. The air felt lighter. Honest. "He told me you didn't believe in me," she said softly. I exhaled slowly. "I always believed in you." "Enough to step back." She nodded, absorbing that. "I don't know what to do with him yet." "You don't have to decide today," I said. "Clarity doesn't demand immediacy." She leaned her head against my shoulder. "I wish I'd known sooner." "Maybe," I said, "but you know now." Across the field, Victor stood alone, phone pressed to his ear, speaking urgently to someone unseen. For the first time, he looked small. Rowan followed my gaze. "He built his identity on that story," she said. "What happens now?" I watched Victor turn away, his shoulders hunched, his confidence stripped bare. "Now," I said, "he has to live without it." Rowan smiled faintly, not with satisfaction, but with resolve. As we stood to leave, I felt something I hadn't in years. Not victory, not closure, alignment. The truth hadn't needed to be forced. It had waited, patient, precise. And when it surfaced, it didn't ask for permission. That was when I realized something I would carry with me long after the stadium emptied. Being the hero isn't about being seen, it's about showing up, even when no one notices, and trusting that the truth knows when to speak for itself.
You've just stepped into her revenge side, where every wound finds its justice, and every silence ends with truth. If her story struck a chord, make sure to like, share, and subscribe. Your support keeps these stories alive. Another secret waits in the next video. See how her revenge begins.